This is the Content Marketing Podcast, episode number 221, Dave Mastovich on how to segment your audience. Hello and welcome to the Content Marketing Podcast. This is the show where we help you grow your tribe and your bottom line through insanely good content. I'm your host, Rachel Parker of Resonance Content Marketing, and today is April 6th, 2017. Hello, or as we say in Texas, howdy, or howdy y'all, if you want to be real proper. And thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. Speaking of Texas, I have a special invitation for my peeps here in Houston. On May 25th, I will have the honor of presenting at MarTech Houston. This is going to be a fantastic one-day conference focused on the latest marketing strategies for small and medium-sized businesses. And I would love to see you there. For more information, I'm going to give you a URL. It's bit.ly/MarTech Houston. Now, MarTech Houston is spelled MarTechHouston, and that is all caps. So bit.ly/all caps MarTechHouston. Early bird pricing is available, but only through April 15th. So grab your spot ASAP. And if you're planning on coming, shoot me a tweet and let me know. Keep an eye out for you. Okay, just a reminder, this podcast is available on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play Music. So if you like what you hear, please feel free to click on over and subscribe. I also invite you to download our complimentary ebook, Top 10 Reasons Why Your Social Media Sucks. Download today to learn the top 10 mistakes that businesses make on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and other social networks, and easy turnaround tips for each situation. To snag your free copy, go to contentmarketinggift.com. All one word, contentmarketinggift.com. Okay, last week I shared some insights from no larger a source than Google itself. Yes, the gods of Mountain View have spoken, and they shared the results of some interesting research that actually busts some of the biggest myths around B2B marketing, and we shared that with you last week. If you happen to miss that episode, feel free to check it out on iTunes or Google Play Music or via the RSS feed. Today, we are delighted to welcome a special guest to the show. Dave Mastovich of the No BS Marketing Podcast will be stopping by to share his insights on how to segment our audiences. But first, it's time to check in with our news feed for this week's rundown of news you can use. In the beginning, there was Snapchat. Then there was Instagram Stories. Now, Big Papa Facebook itself is getting in on the ephemeral content game. Yes, Facebook Stories has now launched for all users. And we've been talking about this here and there. They did a beta run in Ireland a few months ago, but now it is out there for all to use. So Facebook Stories are photo and short video collections that can be viewed up to 2 times and that disappear after 24 hours, just like Snapchat, just like Instagram Stories. Now, one advantage over Instagram Stories, by the way, Instagram is owned by Facebook, so wrap your little noggin around that fact any way you can. One advantage over Instagram Stories is that Facebook Stories harnesses the filters and the lenses that Snapchat users love. In fact, of the people I've talked to who are digging their heels in over at Snapchat, they say, I love the filters and I love the lenses. Well, Facebook Stories has a lot of those cool features that the Snapchat crowd loves. So, okay, how to get to it. When you open your Facebook mobile app, you will see stories from the people in your network at the top of the screen. And it'll be a little row of circles at the top of the screen, just like you see in Instagram Stories. And to create your own story, when you are on the Facebook mobile app at the home screen, just swipe right, and that will take you to the camera from which you can create your stories. Now, once you've created your content, you can either share it with individual contacts or you can share it under My Story, which means it will be visible to everyone in your community. Once again, just like Instagram Stories. And of course, once you share a post once you've shared that story, it will display, or it will be available for 24 hours, and then it will be gone forever. So let me know, have you checked out Facebook stories? Have you kicked the tires, taken around the block a few times? What are your thoughts about it? Will you use it? Are you digging your heels in at Snapchat or Instagram stories? I would love to hear what you think about this latest development. So go ahead and tweet me at Rach Parker, and I would love to hear what you think. Okay, more news out of Facebook. They have been very busy this month. Facebook has actually good news for fans of 360-degree video. Facebook 360 Live is now available to all profiles and pages. So now anyone with a 360 camera can go live on Facebook. And what Facebook has done, they have integrated with several of the most popular 360 cameras, those different models that are out there, to make, as they put it, to make live 360 videos, quote, easy, reliable, and fun. Now, they're also introducing what they call spatial audio. And what that does, I'm quoting from the Facebook post here, gives viewers the ability to experience 360-degree sound just as they would in real life. Now, I have not seen, or have not heard, rather, spatial audio in action, but I would think that it works the same as the 360 camera. Like as you move your device around, you'll be able to hear what's going on in that direction instead of just seeing it. So very cool stuff. I could see this being a great feature for conferences or live events, or maybe looking at new locations and showing people your new digs. Lots and lots of ways to use this, but you do have to have a 360 camera to hook it up. If you'd like to learn more, check out the blog post for this episode, and I will provide the link there. It is a bit long for me to share here, but I will provide the link in the blog post for this episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. Okay, our content hit of the week is a post titled Why You Need Content Strategy Before Editorial Planning. This is written by Megan Casey over at the Content Marketing Institute website. And, I smiled as soon as I saw the title for this post, because I said, I know exactly what she's going to be talking about. I talk to so many content marketers, or so many marketers, they want to get into content marketing and they want to jump right into the editorial calendar. Now, if that, some of them are just ready to just kind of get the ball rolling and start posting wherever. But as Megan points out, you first need a content strategy. And I really like how she phrases it. She says, content strategy helps organizations provide the right content to the right people at the right times for the right reasons. And that should be the purpose of any strategy. And so, to avoid wasting our time on ventures that have nothing to do with providing the right content to the right people at the right times for the right reasons, we really need to back up and do a strategy. Now, if you have picked up a copy of the Content Marketing Coach, you will know that I go into great detail about how to put together a strategy. If you want to grab your copy today, you can go to contentmarketingcoachbook.com. But Megan also in this post provides some very sound advice for putting together a solid content strategy. It is a very good read, and I will, of course, provide the link in the blog post for this episode. That's it for this week's update. If you stumble across something you think might be of interest to your fellow content marketers, please tweet it to me at Rach Parker so that we can share. Now it's time for this week's Spotlight segment. Dave Mastovich on how to segment our audiences. Author and marketing trailblazer Dave Mastovich, has helped companies transform their messaging and improve their marketing ROI for decades. He's the founder and CEO of Mass Solutions, host of the No BS Marketing Podcast, and author of the book Get Where You Want to Go Through Marketing, Selling, and Storytelling. His blog, Light Reading, has been featured in over 50 media outlets with a readership of more than 1 million. And today he's graciously agreed to stop by the Content Marketing Podcast and drop some wisdom about segmenting our audiences. So without further ado, here is my interview with Dave Mastovich. Hey Dave, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Rachel.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Well, I just gave everyone your official bio, but why don't you give us a little more personal introduction to who you are and what you do?
Sure. I have a background throughout my career of doing turnaround leadership, which implemented a lot of marketing, communication, and sales to help companies turn around or to build divisions. And while doing that, I kept realizing that every 2 or 3 years I would get excited to go on to the next endeavor, the next big opportunity, and thought, why don't I just turn this into a company? So I wish I could say it was that clear cut because it really wasn't. There
Right.
were many failures along the way, some successes, and a lot of times being humbled. And then at some point, I just said, this is time, and started Mass Solutions.
Hmm.
And it's a company that's a pure marketing firm. There aren't many, in my estimation, and there's a big difference between an ad agency, a
Hmm.
PR firm, and a content firm as opposed to a marketing firm. Doesn't mean any of those aren't good or
Hmm.
that any are better than the other. It's just they're different. And
Hmm.
so we're a pure marketing firm, and I use the phrase no BS marketing. So I try to help companies be no BS marketers, of which we've all been BS marketers at some
Hmm.
point in our careers, including me. And so
Hmm.
it takes discipline to remain that way.
Hmm. Hmm. Lord knows there's enough BS around that we need somebody to help us cut through it.
Yes.
Great. So thank you for agreeing to come on and share with us your wisdom about market segmentation. As a faithful graduate of my eighth grade composition class, I was taught to always define our terms before we get into discussion. So, give us some insights on what we really mean when we talk about market segmentation.
Market segmentation involves dividing a market into distinct groups of buyers who have distinct needs, characteristics, or behaviors, and who might require separate products, services, or marketing mixes.
Hmm.
That's really what market segmentation comes down to.
Okay, okay. So let's look at because sometimes gurus talk about these concepts and they never really get down to what it looks like in the real world. So can you give us an example of what segmentation looks like in the real world?
Absolutely. I think when you look at dividing that market into those distinct groups that I said, people often take a quick stab at their target markets and go
Hmm.
by their instincts and think that they have their target markets drilled down. And I often say a subtle tweak in your market segmentation can be a huge impact on the bottom line. To
Hmm.
take one industry that we work with quite a bit, I had some chief marketing officer positions in healthcare, and
Hmm.
so many of our clients, probably 40% of our clients, are healthcare. One industry is senior living.
Hmm.
When you look at senior living, that could be assisted living, independent living, or skilled care.
Hmm.
In that space, to drill down their target markets, immediately you would look at the actual person who can live in the community, but equally important, if not more important, are the adult children who
Yes.
make that decision.
Hmm.
So that's a target market. Now, then you also have referral sources,
Hmm.
which could be social service staff at a healthcare facility or a health system or a hospital, could be the area agency on aging, could be all kinds of different referral sources. So, with those three, and there's others, but to start
Hmm.
and keep it simple, those three are broad segments that each would need to be drilled down. And that's the key, is the drill down of the market segmentation.
Hmm. Yeah, great example. And it's funny, Dave, just last week I was at a conference about healthcare marketing, and another very important segment for them is recruiting because they need nurses, they need techs, and that needs to kind of fold into their whole marketing mix.
You're exactly right. A phrase that I use is no BS, go BS. And the first no BS means no BS, like the
Right.
term you know. But go BS means go beyond sales. And that
Ah.
leads to this phrase: who you market to is different than who you sell to.
Hmm.
And you just touched on that because recruitment and retention are so essential to any successful company. And
Hmm.
recruitment and retention means you have to make employees a key target audience, a key
Hmm.
market segment that you actually build specific marketing plans towards, and you build plans towards prospective employees. So no BS, go BS means no BS, go beyond sales, because many companies do their market segments based on who they can sell to. And who you market to is different than who you sell to, because you have employees, prospective employees, referral sources. Even outside of healthcare, we all have referral sources. You and I both have people that refer clients to us. There are referral sources in just about any business. So who you market to is different than who you sell to. You have to make your employees a key target market. You have to make prospective employees a key target market. And you have to make referral sources a key target market.
Yeah, and I love that that mantra that who you market to is different from who you sell to. And I was thinking about the B2B world, which is a world that I work in fairly often. I ask these companies, who do you want to target? And they say, oh, the CEO, or the CTO or the CMO or whoever signs the check. And what they're doing, for one thing, these people are ridiculously hard to get to. And number two, it's that's not where the decision making begins. So, by only focusing on who signs the check, you could be missing out on huge opportunities.
Exactly. When you have the B2B world, they often don't realize how important their cultural messaging is for their current employees and to recruit new employees. So that's one topic. And what I talk about with that is a recent study I read showed that 2 out of 3 consumers today have their decisions impacted by their perceptions of the CEO and others in the C-suite. So when you run into a B2B company and you start talking about how critical it is that the CEO, CFO, CTO, they have a presence on LinkedIn, that they have their own brand within the company's brand, you often get scratching of the heads and they say, well, we're a B2B company. Why do I need to do that?
Right.
2 out of 3 people make their assumptions about companies based on their perception of the C-suite. So you still have to build a brand around that. So that is another market segment where you say we have to have our perception of our C-suite has to help reach our target markets as well, from both a retaining employees and recruiting of employees.
Yep. Great example. So Dave, you mentioned that some companies approach segmenting kind of going by their guts and just kind of glossing over it. And okay, here's who we think we're talking to. Let's go in and do our marketing. But on the other side, how do you know when you're done segmenting? Because I could easily see this kind of becoming an obsession and winding up with 100 segments that help you not at all. So how do you know when you've got a solid segmentation plan?
The thing that I tell companies is segmentation doesn't end ever. And you have to have discipline, because you just made a tremendous point. Having 100 segments or 50 segments or 30 segments is probably not going to work. What you're going to do is have 3 to 5 major segments that you slice and dice within that, to maybe have another 3, 5. If you're a business to consumer, you might have 10 under one of the large groups. But when I mentioned referral sources, the actual residents, and adult children as 3 major target markets for senior living, those are the 3 major target markets. Each of those segments get drilled down, and they might have 3 to 5 segments under them. So the first thing is, you don't want to go so segmented that it becomes just an obsession, as you said, and a waste of time. But it doesn't ever end, because what you want to do is continually adapt and adjust based on what happened, based on the results, and based on trends in the industry.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely wonderful advice. So of course, Dave, this is the Content Marketing Podcast. So tell us a little bit about, okay, we've done our homework, we've got our segments. How do we approach those various segments through our content?
What I like to say about the content aspect is, you utilize your segments and you position yourself through each segment through content. Let me say that again, is the positioning by segment is done through your content. So if you are unable to tweak your content by segment, you become what I call a content polluter, in that you far from hitting the bullseye. We talk a lot about hitting the bullseye and hit the bullseye marketing, tied all to the no BS theme. We don't want to be content polluters, and you become a content polluter when you haven't drilled down that segment and you haven't positioned based on the segment. And by positioning, I mean each segment has a different want and need. Remember, we said they have distinct needs, characteristics, or behaviors. Well, you as a company have multiple positive attributes. Your company has 3 to 5 to 7 major things that you do that your clients love. So does Mass Solutions. Well, each segment wants something slightly different. So you have to position by segment through your content. And that means tweaking the message to what matters most to them, making it about them, and using and adjusting to the medium that they use to consume content.
Okay, great advice. So Dave, that being said, most organizations, unless you're talking like IBM or huge corporations, most organizations have one blog, one Facebook page, one LinkedIn page, etc. So given that they might be serving up to 10 different segments, how do they balance the need to speak to each of these segments, given that they only have one channel in each venue?
The first thing that I emphasize that companies need to do is, the great Simon Sinek book talked about start with why. And as I read that book, I thought of people like you and I who have to take that a step beyond. And we have to ask our clients to answer the 2 why questions. The first why is their why or reason for being. The second why is their customer's why or reason for buying. Once you've answered those 2 why questions, hopefully there's some similarities there. And there often is, where your why and your customer's why are close enough that you can build messaging around that, and that answers the question of what's the big idea. So you have your core theme or big idea, and then messaging pillars underneath that are used based on the target market. So I am not suggesting that someone has to rewrite and recreate all kinds of content because they have multiple segments. I'm saying that core message should still work as the overarching theme. When I was with the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, we were trying to convince people in a 29 county region that they needed to come to the major University of Pittsburgh Medical Center hospitals. And we used the positioning statement, choose your healthcare as if your life depended on it. That resonates to anyone. But when we went to each segment, we tweaked the content based on that segment using our messaging pillars and the medium we wanted to use. So when we were talking to employers, it was back to back to back single-digit rate increases for your health insurance. That resonated with CEOs and CFOs. But when we were talking to the weekend warrior, we showed them that we had an affiliation with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Pittsburgh Penguins, and that our sports medicine program was great. So it still was about choosing your health care as if your life depended on it. You blew out your knee playing flag football. That was different than the employer that was single-digit rate increases back to back to back years. So you have your core big idea and messaging pillars under it. You adjust those messaging pillars based on the segment and based on the medium they use. So you mentioned various social media outlets. I stress to people that within the company, use whatever medium works for them. I'm a big LinkedIn person. I'm a B2B segment is a big piece of what Mass Solutions does. My C-suite people are connected on LinkedIn. I'm able to reach thousands of people through LinkedIn. So I personally use LinkedIn in a lot of my direct marketing and direct selling and business development to CEOs, CFOs, and CMOs. But my team takes the message and applies that to Twitter and applies it to the podcast and the blog to reach those different segments with slightly different messaging, not totally recreated, not BS, not being duplicitous. You take messages tied to your key message pillars and you make it about them, each segment. Each segment wants one of your attributes. You focus on that attribute for that segment.
Yep. Great advice. And Dave, as you're talking about, different audiences for different venues, sometimes when I talk to people about Instagram and they say, oh, well, that's a millennial thing. They're not signing the checks. They're not making the decisions. First of all, that's not entirely true because millennials are starting to rise up in their organizations, but they are part of that greater network that you talked about, the referral sources, the employees. So how do you approach different networks in terms of the different market segments that are active on those networks?
It goes back to the target market segmentation I mentioned earlier, and let's go back to the original example about senior living being independent living, assisted living, or skilled nursing. We work with many clients, and there is a need for a social media presence, but they also know that the adult children tend to be in the 50 to 70 year age range, and they know that the actual residents tend to be 80 to 95 years old, even 85 to 95. Both of those segments will use Facebook to reach, but you're not going to necessarily be as strong with them on Twitter. But Instagram lends itself tremendously because of the visual element, so we can show the seniors living a quality life and having an enhanced life by moving into this community. So we still will use Instagram. And the other point that you made that I want to touch on is that each segment uses social media. When I hear people say that's a millennial thing, I almost chuckle and say, really? Really? Do you think that someone 52 years old doesn't use social media? They might not use Instagram as much as they use LinkedIn, but they might use Facebook a lot. Yep. So it's about all through the course of time, we've had multiple mediums. It's not really that different from when we had 25 radio stations and 55 cable stations, 3 broadcast networks, a bunch of newspapers, direct mail. It's not that different. And I get frustrated when people say the millennials this, the millennials that, because back in 1990, we still had to say, how do we reach someone 50? How to reach someone 60? How to reach someone 25? And it was different then, and it's different now, and it'll be different tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. It's funny that you mentioned that, Dave, because my mother-in-law is 74, and if I want to reach her, I have to message her on Facebook. That's where she is every day. So.
And your other, I agree. And your other point about millennials, I'm a millennial defender, even though it's a challenge adjusting to them in our workplace and as clients. But they have a potential to be a tremendous generation, and they will. Most generations end up being great. What you just said rings true. I was speaking to a group of CEOs in Kansas City last week, and there were 18 CEOs, and 4 of them were 29 to 33 years old. 4 of them. That is what's happening. You're seeing that. And those 4 had a completely different mindset than the 4 that were 60 plus, and then the rest were Gen Xers probably. And you looked at it, and the way they consumed content was completely different. The millennials were actually much more data driven. They saw the data side of marketing and content, whereas the older audiences saw the creative side of marketing and content. So you and I have to adjust to that, and so do your listeners, of how we create our content.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Well, Dave, I want to shift gears a little bit because I talked about in your intro about your book, Get Where You Want to Go, and and in that book you talk about marketing, selling, and storytelling. So tell us a little bit about the book and about how you approach that.
Throughout my career, I would take these stops that I mentioned earlier, where I would go and be part of an amazing turnaround with a team of tremendous people at each stop. And at each place, crazy things would happen, because when you have 6 days cash on hand for a $100 million a year company, you're worried about making payroll for 1,200 employees. You see crazy things happen. And each step of the way, I would often say, that's going to make a chapter of my book. And finally, people kept saying to me, when are you going to do that book? When are you going to do that book? And finally, I just said, I'm going to take the time to write this book. And I broke it down into stuff that I was passionate about, from the marketing, selling, and storytelling, because of that title says it all. Storytelling is a part of almost everything we do in life. It is so critical to how we function in society. And storytelling plays a significant role in both sales and also in marketing. And marketing and sales are 2 separate yet equally important groups. And I often use the law and order phrase. That's part of my workshop, as I talk about how, if you think of the show Law and Order in the beginning, and it talks about the criminal justice system, and it's 2 separate yet equally important groups, that's what sales, marketing are. It should be marketing, sales, not sales and marketing. So those are the facets of that book where I talk about what the difference of sales is between marketing, what the no BS definition of marketing is, and how storytelling drives everything. And it was just so exhilarating to put that together, get that book in its hardcover and paperback and ebook, get that out and just see the response to it. And it's just been fascinating, and I just love it. And continually work on new ways to get that message out. I've moved to the podcast like you. We both have been at this a little while with hundreds of episodes. I see podcasts as a big content thing. And so I shifted a lot of my effort to that after having that first book, had a second smaller ebook, and are in the midst of doing a third. But right now my big focus is getting the word out about no BS marketing through workshops, keynotes, and the podcast.
Fantastic. Well, Dave, where can our listeners go if they want to follow you on social media and also learn more about market segmentation?
My favorite place is LinkedIn. I'm most comfortable with that. I was an early adopter for LinkedIn, probably within the first 6 months of LinkedIn. And I post a lot of content there, and I have a lot of conversations there. So that's David M. Mastovich on LinkedIn. And for your guests, if you go to masssolutions.biz/Rachel, we have a market segmentation, hit the bullseye, target market drill down summary for you that I basically took segments of my workshop and turned it into an audio deck that anyone that comes to masssolutions.biz/Rachel can get that for free.
Wonderful. And of course, where can they go to find your podcast?
That is it's at masssolutions.biz/bold solutions, but it's also on iTunes and Stitcher and all the others. It's No Bullshit Marketing with Dave Mastovich. Of course, the word bullshit had to have the 9 little asterisk button, so iTunes wouldn't kick me back. That's a true story. They kicked me out initially and told me that's what I had to do, and I was completely fine with that.
Absolutely. It's a family show, so we got to.
It is. But with that phrase, it's really just to make the point, and it's not so much to be profane. It's to make the point because you and I are in this cluttered content universe where there are a lot of BSers. And so when you get someone like you or me, we have to do something to make sure people know that we're different. And hence, that's why the mantra and the workshop is built around that, because immediately it gets the attention. And you have people at the beginning of my workshop saying, okay, tell me, am I a BSer or not? And I say, well, we've all been.
Yeah.
But here's some ways to not be one.
Exactly. Well, Dave, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights on market segmentation. And keep in touch. Look forward to having you back in the future.
Thanks, Rachel.
All right.
Enjoyed it.
Many thanks again to our guest Dave Mastovich for sharing his insights on market segmentation for content marketers. Again, you can find him on LinkedIn under David M. Mastovich, and that's Mastovich, Mastovich. Also, that URL to get Dave's audio deck is masssolutions.biz/Rachel. So Mass Solutions is masssolutions.biz/Rachel. RACHEL, of course. If you have any questions or if you want to add to the conversation, please feel free to tweet me at @RachParker. Would love to hear from you. Now it's time for our content marketing tip of the week. One of my favorite points that Dave made in our interview is about distinguishing whom you sell to from whom you market to. And I know I just ended 2 phrases with a preposition, and I apologize. But often when we create content, the temptation is to want to get straight to the decision maker. And as I mentioned, this is particularly the case in the B2B world. I talk to businesses who have a B2B product or service, and I say, okay, who's your audience? They say, oh, we want to go straight to the CEO. We don't want to mess with we don't want to mess with human resources or marketing or whatever the department would be that corresponds to their service. We want to go straight to that C-suite. And, in doing that, for number one, these people are darn near impossible to get to. But number 2, we neglect the web of individuals around that person who could be instrumental in getting you on their radar. So yes, maybe the CEO does have the final sign off and the final budgetary approval, but odds are the decision is not going to start with him or her. It's going to start further down the chain. And so the next time you look at your target audience, your current target audience, broaden your horizons a bit and think about the network around that person. Whom does he or she listen to in the area that your product or service is concerned with? Or who else in the organization is likely to start the decision process that would end up on the desk of the CEO or the CMO or the CIO or someone with that final authority? By looking at whom we market to instead of only whom we sell to, we open up our content to a whole new world of possibilities and, of course, open our brands to whole new venues of opportunity. Okay, campers, that is it for me today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Content Marketing Podcast, and thanks again to our special guest, Dave Mastovich. If you like what you've heard today, please feel free to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play Music or via our RSS feed. And if you really like what you've heard, please leave us a quick review on iTunes. I would so appreciate it. Also, remember that my book, The Content Marketing Coach, Everything You Need to Get in the Game and Win, is available in book and Kindle format on Amazon. To learn more about the book and to download a free chapter, visit contentmarketingcoachbook.com. As always, I like to leave you with a quote, and today, of course, we have had the finals of the NCAA basketball tournament. Did I call it a tournament? Did I use the wrong word? Anyway, congratulations to the North Carolina Tar Heels. So in honor of the crowning of a new champion, we have a quote from the world of basketball. John Wooden once said, quote, "Failure is not fatal, but failure to change might be," unquote. Let me say that again. Failure is not fatal, but failure to change might be, unquote. Again, this is Rachel Parker with Resonance Content Marketing. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you again next week. Take care.